This week, my friends, reality has changed. We now have 2 launch providers that can land orbital boosters out in the ocean. Yes, indeed, it has been a huge week for Blue Origin. What I'm going to do today is essentially split this video in half. We'll kick off all the exciting development at Starbase around all things Starship, and then jump into New Glenn, ESCAPADE, and much more space news that was somehow all crammed into 7 days. Sit back and relax. This one has not just been busy, it has been historic.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
This video is sponsored by Displate. Hey, Marcus House with you here, and the rapid transformation of SpaceX's Starship launch site is honestly staggering every week right now. The destruction of the old launch infrastructure speaks for itself perhaps, but take a look at this. In just a few weeks, the disassembly of the launch mount has been astounding to see. Shaun has spent a bunch of time watching them dissect it to become the skeleton that we already see, and this was how it looked just on Monday. From above, thanks to the always awesome views by RGV aerial photography, you can see right here the many larger pieces that had already been removed from the outer shielding through the previous week. This week though, they were really digging right into that inner mount structure. That, of course, was part of the original ring that the launch mount is made of. Inside that, over time, they had installed all kinds of electrical, pneumatic and hydraulic pipes and manifolds that supply the 20 Raptor quick disconnects with all the gases required for those outer Raptors to start up. Having the open access here now will help a lot with SpaceX's ability to remove huge chunks of this even faster, I imagine. It should also allow them to rather easily remove the hold-down arms that previously held the booster to the pad. It's another great opportunity to appreciate the monstrous scale of this compared to the team there on the ground making quick work of all of this. Now, interestingly, we can see that SpaceX covered the deluge plate in a layer of dirt, likely to just dampen the fall of any material being cut off from above. You don't want some gigantic piece of debris bouncing somewhere out of control or causing a bunch of unnecessary noise. With almost all of the upper half of the launch ring soon removed, the team got to work with the remaining lower half, and super aggressively too. Look at those huge parts simply being dropped down below the launch mount. That also means that now, one by one, the launch mount legs will be standing on their own for the first time since back in 2021. You may recall me talking about the huge Drawworks hoist being relocated last week, which controls the raising and the lowering of the tower arms. Well, taking a look behind the tower this week, we can see both sides where the Drawworks and associated spool systems were placed. They are now looking pretty empty, and that is because this system has now been removed and sent away on Saturday. Whether SpaceX is just performing maintenance on these or if they will bring in new ones remains to be seen. In any case, we still believe these will swap positions as we see with other towers in construction at Pad 2 and of course at Launch Complex 39A in Florida. Moving over a little, we can see SpaceX already making good use of all this space now given that the berm is now completely gone. It seems, at least for the time being, that this is where they have moved all the larger sections they've removed from the launch mount. These will surely be cut up in smaller pieces before they are moved off-site ready to be recycled, and you may also notice that just behind it, they now have access to all of the lines that tap off from those that head towards the tower and launch mount. Those tapped off lines then ran over to the old cryo stations that were used a long time back when they tested vehicles here before all of that moved over to Massey's. Ironically, right beneath the launch mount pieces is where the culverts are for both the tower or ship propellant lines on the left. You've then got the launch mount or booster propellant lines on the right, as we can see from this image taken back in 2021. Given that that has since been covered with layers of permanent concrete, it'll probably be one of the last things that they remove. That's because we imagine working on all that would greatly reduce the access to the pad, requiring the team to detour around the backside of the tower. So yeah, looking at everything going on, it is a pretty dramatic difference and will continue to change with a lot more of this original hardware being removed. Moving to the old tank farm, we have the absence of all the subcoolers here on the liquid oxygen side. If you missed it last week, those were all seen arriving at McGregor following their removal, so they're likely to be reused at other sites soon to be under construction. The subchillers on the methane side, however, have had the outlets covered up here to prevent debris from entering into them, so they should be reused elsewhere too. Not so much all of this piping, which is largely custom installed to fit the exact measurements needed at the time. Pretty much all the old pipework will likely need to be scrapped into these bins here and then recycled. On the roof of the old fluids bunker, they've been making quick work removing all of the high-pressure gas storage cylinders as well. It seems like anywhere you look they have been in full-on demolition mode. It'll be exciting to see what they do with all of the freed up room here. Will they consolidate all of the liquid methane storage tanks in the one location perhaps? Time will tell. Across the road at the air separation site, the pile driller has been busy this week. You'll notice the tops of the rebar cages sticking up out of the ground where piles have been installed. These have been placed where we expect the larger and heavier machinery shown in the site plans will go. We think this will probably look somewhat similar to the Lind site that has rapidly been assembled over at Brownsville. The hundreds of bags of foam glass gravel we could see here last week have been emptied into the site's foundation, of course. At the narrower part of the site, they've now laid down quite a substantial layer. It's worth noting that SpaceX has now also started to install conduit pipes for electrical and data lines within the walls here too, so it'll hopefully become clear soon what kind of path the cryogenic lines will take around the site. Perhaps we may even get to see some early clues about how they will transport all of this cryogenic fluid over to the launch site. We're curious to see if SpaceX will have a pipeline running underground to feed this into the propellant farm, or if they will simply use trucks to manually transport it. I'm kind of hoping on the former. Okay, so at the new Pad 2 nearing completion, we have been watching some interesting work going on to test everything out here. Recently, we've seen them rolling out this brand new piece of testing hardware which was lifted into place about a week ago. This is to test out the arms and clamps used to support and hold down the Super Heavy. SpaceX has nicknamed this piece of hardware ibuprofen, and it really is quite different compared to the one that we saw being used over at Pad 1 quite some time ago now. I think by the looks of this, it is safe to assume that this unit will also be reused to test the future Starship pads as they get to this point as well. Given that the access beneath this style of launch mount is a lot more limited to the current mount that they are ripping apart, they obviously needed to figure out a better way. Well, this seems like a rather ingenious solution actually. As shown in this awesome work by Chrome Kiwi, it has 6 interfaces for the ball sockets on the clamp arms and is speculated to be some sort of alignment jib. By pulling on the outer 2 clamp arms, they generate enough pushing force for that central hold down arm to certify it for a full stack and then some. That is done on both sides simultaneously. Now, in case you're worried that the hold down arms might not be able to sustain the pulling loads for even more powerful super heavy static fire tests than we have ever seen before, keep in mind that the launch mat had been lifted onto its permanent spot here using 4 of these very arms as the supports. Workers could be seen throughout the week rotating the device to individually test each set of clamps, first on Wednesday and again on Thursday. This here would have been the 5th and 6th clamp tests so far out of the 20. Now, after some more tests on not just the flame bucket, they again did some purging of the top deck. We're getting closer to finally seeing it all come to life together. SpaceX has even rolled the 2 final back pieces for the booster quick disconnect hoods out on Wednesday night, and just like that, the liquid oxygen hood was already lifted on top, covering up one of the 2. Heading over to the build site, the final previous generation Booster 17 early in the week had the cap removed off the top. SpaceX designed these to keep the elements out from all the hardware here in the interstage, such as the grid fin motors, computers, and everything else packed under there. Yes, it seems like it is finally time to see this redundant hardware scrapped. Apart from some initial cryogenic proof testing fun, this one didn't even have a chance to fire up. The next day, the booster started moving, but having gone back and forth a few times, it was simply placed back on its previous resting spot again. That didn't stop them from starting the disassembly though, as they've been removing parts of the chines, revealing the COPVs underneath. That wasn't the only strange thing that happened here either. Before I dive into that, I just want to share why our sponsor Displate is such a monumental help to our channel here. I don't think people realise how much of the effort that goes into what we make here is possible because of this. Displate has been instrumental in what we do and with the content that you see here, and I absolutely adore the incredible metal prints that brighten up your space. I must admit, I've almost got an obsession with them at this point, and I've got them hanging in a bunch of areas. I don't know. What do you think? Am I obsessed or what? Both of my kids love them in their rooms too. Just here, normally out of the camera's view, I've got a 4-panel set that I'm always switching out, and the entry to the home, I've got them there too using the extra large displays. If you have watched along here and seen these for quite some time, you would know how they work. The magnetic mounting is just so simple. No nails, no frames, no wall damage. Especially good if you're renting, and to stick the initial plates on, all you literally need to do is clean the spot on the wall, stick on the adhesive base, and the magnets just stick on top like that. Once that is in place, which just takes a moment, I can instantly switch out the disc plates with any others in my ever-growing collection. Some of the designs have this neat textured finish. It's maybe a little tricky to see on camera, but the Textra option makes it feel as good as it looks. I didn't realise this until just recently, but you can just submit your own images and they'll print it for you with the custom disc plate option. It's a perfect gift idea, and with the massive discounts they've got going on this month for Black Friday, it's also the perfect time. You can pick up 37% off 1 or 2 disc plates, 43% off for 3 or 4, and 46% off 5 or more, and that even applies to those with the Textra finish. Once you place your order, delivery is super fast, just 4 to 5 days, so follow my link below there or use code MarcusHouse at checkout to take advantage of that. There are so many to choose from the very extensive range. Thank you, Displate. Okay, so back to the build site. What on earth was going on here? Last weekend, one of the tower cranes had started spinning out of control for multiple hours. Once night fell, it was back at it again. I mean, it is normal to see tower cranes move slightly by wind forces and whatnot, but this was obviously spinning under power. Nothing to worry about though, because not long after, all 4 tower cranes were back in action and the GameplayReviewUK is now rapidly being assembled. Shaun was back out on site to take in all this again. I've got to say, just the logistics of having only the very pieces required to continue assembly delivered and also on time is kind of mind-boggling. Unlike in Florida, they are really quite strapped for space here, so the drivers are constantly showing off their reversing skills. In this construction, they are much more precisely installing all the individual beams, which is quite different to how they assembled the mega bays. In that case, you may recall they had major corner pieces constructed at the Sanchez area, and then those were moved over to the mega bay to be installed there. Now sadly, of course, as the Gigabay goes up, the views of the Starship rocket assembly process will be further restricted, but it hasn't stopped us from keeping up just yet. When there is a will, there is a way, and the first version 3 ship is rapidly still being assembled. With the transfer tubes now sufficiently integrated, it was lifted onto the centre workstation. Given that this section of Ship 39 doesn't have aft clamps, the teams came up with quite an ingenious way to at least stabilise the ship there while they were waiting for the final aft section. Yes indeed, that is just blocks of wood right there. Now, of course, with the ship coming together, we also have the 2 ship aft test article sections that we were watching arrive last week. These have been stacked together and the full unit was moved back into the Star Factory. This is certainly designed to stress test the version 3 ship structure design to see if it can survive all the forces experienced during a flight. I imagine this will currently be getting decked out with all of the sensors and other hardware required to put it through the ringer before it soon rolls out towards Massey's. Speaking of heading over here, this week you can almost feel just how close we are to having SpaceX resume testing. This time though, with version 3 flight hardware. One of the more important pieces of hardware, the Quick Disconnect interface, was just recently delivered and installed. This is the first stand to get the version 3 interface, so all eyes were on this after the installation. This of course matches what we saw earlier on Test Tank 18. The engine chill pond is also now back in place, with the pipe installed having a wider diameter than the one previously here. This likely accounts for the required increased flow rates with Raptor 3 and potentially perhaps even the eventual move to have 9 engines on Starship. Yes, as far as we know, the extra 3 vacuum engines will still be a thing. Pipes on the other side of the stand connecting it to the bunker are almost finished too, and you can see over this past week they've completely poured the roof. The blast wall work that will protect the brand new methane farm setup has been in full swing again, with the crew installing all of this formwork and then lifting these rebar cages into place. It's all beginning to look very clean now in this area, and we're hoping to be again reporting soon on some epic testing. Thanks as always for being subscribed here and watching along. There are now almost more of you here now than the population of Tasmania where I live, so thanks for helping us reach that goal, my friends. Now, before we leave the area, the ship Cryo stand over here, which workers have been busy modifying since it arrived at Massey's, has now been rolled back to the build site. That is likely to pick up the brand new Test Tank 18, which is again inside the Star Factory getting finalised. Now, this Cryo stand doesn't have any clamps at all, but we suspect that the test article will simply be welded straight to the old version 2 interfacing blocks, which won't be needed for version 3 anyway. Now, the news everybody was waiting for, the launch of the second ever New Glenn rocket, was, let's say, an interesting one. Blue Origin were at the pad last Sunday, but unfortunately the weather didn't favour them with the launch that day. But no worries, they were back on Wednesday afternoon, right? Wrong. In a much more unusual issue, weather had interrupted this attempt as well. Not this sort of weather though, that sort of weather. Yes, you've probably seen plenty of images from this massive solar storm that hit Earth midweek, interrupting space flights and triggering these beautiful auroras across various parts of the Northern Hemisphere. Indeed, we have observed an X-class explosion on the surface of the Sun, the most intense kind of solar flares that there are. This triggered a bunch of coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, earlier in the week, and some of this was earthbound. What hit us midweek was considerable. Here you can see them as observed by the SOHO spacecraft on Tuesday. These were so massive, in fact, that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration had issued a severe G4 level warning. It is still incredibly difficult to predict and forecast space weather, especially to estimate the time of arrival for coronal mass ejections and the severity of the resulting geomagnetic storms. In fact, we were not sure if or when the CMEs were actually going to hit Earth, with initial estimations predicting them to arrive here on Wednesday in the late evening or even the morning of Thursday, and that isn't very accurate considering that even a minute orbital disturbance due to space weather can critically affect global communication and navigation systems. Thankfully, we do currently have spacecraft that can at least predict the impact of solar storms within a few minutes to a few hours before impact, so that's something. Most importantly, of course, we do have the Earth's magnetosphere and atmosphere always protecting us from the intense radiation. The result, though, are these absolutely spectacular views of the sky. So yeah, anyway, back to the New Glenn. On board, of course, the long-awaited ESCAPADE spacecraft, or the Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamics Explorers. These are twin spacecraft named Blue and Gold, set on a mission to study the Mars climate. After a few mildly annoying holds due to range clearance issues on Thursday, the second New Glenn rocket to fly was on the final countdown. Right on cue, there was the water deluge system kicking into action, and take a look at this.
Lift up detected.
Close motion.
Yes, New Glenn was finally away, powered by the first stage named Never Tell Me the Odds. This was the first time that we got to see all this action in the daylight, and they had some equally amazing views that were posted of the liftoff after the entire event had taken place. Certainly some brand new phone and desktop wallpapers there. All 7 of the BE-4s were, as far as I could see, flawless in their performance, not just through the ascent, but also the incredible events that followed. We had really great quality ground shots on this flight, much better than their first mission that was in the night. Just watch the engines cut off here before stage separation soon after the 3-minute mark. It's interesting that we get that little extra flash of blue fire from the engines right after they shut down. Anyway, seconds later the second stage separated away, and I must admit, at this point we had almost forgotten about Blue and Gold riding away there. Instead, we were all wondering if Blue Origin could stick this landing. About 7 minutes in, you can clearly notice the 3 BE-4s lit back up for that re-entry burn, which lasted about 30 seconds. That exhaust from the 3 engines there lined up created what looked like a curved shield. That's one of my favourite views from the whole flight actually, but there was plenty more to come. Waiting in the ocean was their Jacqueline vessel, and that last minute was so very nail-biting. Could Blue Origin, after almost exactly 1 decade since Falcon 9 made its first landing, be the second space launch provider in history to catch an orbital-class booster? A really amazing tracking shot of it from above as it disappears into the clouds. The actual live stream had a few choppy parts here as they cycled through the various views, but if you missed it, this was really something. Never Tell Me the Odds used its fins and strakes to turn itself vertical again right before the big moment. We had views again from the booster itself, the landing legs deployed, and check this out.
Standing by for touchdown.
Yes, bullseye, and what a moment. The second time that they attempted this and they nailed it. Blue Origin U champions. Look at the landing legs. Yeah, did you see that? Blue Origin has this patented system where the vessel instantly welds itself to the deck. Meanwhile, of course, we had almost forgotten about the actual mission. Well, that was also flawless. The ESCAPADE spacecraft were both deployed as planned there, and although this was a pretty choppy feed at the time, we at least had visual confirmation that they were on their way. Rocket Lab also soon posted that they had successfully established contact with both spacecraft. So, now that they are safely on their way, what science do these plan to study? Well, it's believed Mars was once a wet planet with its own lakes, rivers, oceans, and even rich atmosphere. More data is of course needed as always to really understand that history more accurately, and they also want to find out more about how it has transformed into what it is now. A dry, barren land with most of its atmosphere stripped away along with its ancient magnetic field. Blue and Gold are hosted on Rocket Lab's Explorer-class interplanetary spacecraft buses, with the University of California, Berkeley leading the development of the Science Instrument Suite. Now there is a reason why NASA is sending not just one but a pair of satellites. That is to leverage the advantages of having two different viewpoints and perspectives at the same time. Gathering a more diverse set of data from different vantage points is going to be useful for validation, of course, but it will also allow the research teams to see the changes in Mars's atmosphere over a short timescale. Instead of waiting hours for a single satellite to get back into the same location of its orbit, having the two spacecraft follow each other will mean that they can monitor the same regions minutes apart. Yes, they can slightly adjust the orbits to pass over the same area right after one another at almost any frequency that they choose, so Blue and Gold will fly in formation to map the magnetic fields, upper atmosphere and ionosphere of Mars in 3D and offer never-seen-before insights into how the planet interacts with space weather. It's all very critical for when we eventually kick off human missions. On a more subtle note, this data will also hopefully help us correct radio signal distortions, which will become even more vital as communication and navigation systems are helping us survive on the planet. Now, of course, ESCAPADE was originally meant to launch during last year's Mars transfer window, but was pushed back due to the delays with New Glenn. Since an adequate transfer window is not going to open again until late 2026, that is why this mission has now changed a little bit. In fact, in my opinion, this makes it even more interesting. The twin spacecraft are going to instead be first placed into an orbit around Earth's Lagrange point 2 for about 11 months. From that location, they will wait for the optimal Mars transfer window to reopen again late next year. When it does, the spacecraft will dive right back in towards Earth and slingshot out to Mars using a gravity assist. Once done, they will coast through deep space for 11 more months, arriving at Mars in late 2027, where they will officially begin the Mars science mission. It's also worth noting, I think, that ESCAPADE should pave the way for future cost-effective missions to Mars, and all at a fraction of a traditional Mars mission cost. Under NASA's Simplex program, or the Small Innovations Mission for Planetary Exploration, the entire ESCAPADE mission, including the launch, costs under $80 million, which I think is pretty amazing. And of course, both Blue and Gold have been created by Rocket Lab, again demonstrating how amazing they are. Now, speaking of some neat updates on their next larger rocket, Neutron, Rocket Lab has now finally confirmed that this medium-lift rocket will not be flying in 2025, which, to be honest, was looking pretty much impossible at this point. The maiden launch is now expected sometime instead in mid-2026. They still have a bunch of things to tick off before that, of course. They need to complete the structural and acceptance testing, have the full vehicle integrated, and hot fire tests at Wallops done too. Peter Beck, the CEO, said that the vehicle will be transported to Launch Complex 2 at Wallops in early 2026 for final integration and testing, also adding that Rocket Lab doesn't want to rush the first mission. That is because they have the goal of achieving orbit on this maiden flight. It will be a demonstration flight, of course, with no customer payload, although given that this is Rocket Lab, I'd still expect some sort of fun, neat dummy payload to simulate the capability. Now, interestingly, they won't be attempting booster recovery on this maiden flight, which may be a surprise to some. It is a reusable design, of course, but they are at this stage planning to begin drone ship landings using its platform Return on Investment, I do love that name, starting with Neutron's second flight. We have a little Starlink action as well, kicking off with Booster 1096 lifting off from SLC-40 on its third flight, sending another batch of 29 Starlink satellites into orbit for the Group 687 mission. As I talked about last week, indeed, we are seeing these sets with the extra one satellite in the stack becoming more common thanks to the optimizations in the vehicle and deployment system. It was a late night launch for this one, and a few minutes later, the landing on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. To finalise the week, SpaceX have just hours ago sent 2 more batches of Starlinks within just a few hours of each other. The crazy thing is, they were both from 2 separate pads in Florida. Group 689 was launching here just after 10 PM Friday evening from Launch Complex 39A, and just a few hours later at 1:44 AM on Saturday, there goes the next one for Group 685 at SLC-40. That means they had 2 drone ships out there in the darkness awaiting both of these boosters to come back in. Again, both of these had sets of 29 in the stacks too, so that seems to be the regular standard for sure. It was Flight 8 for Booster 1092, and that was chased by Booster 1078 on its 24th mission. A shortfall of gravitas was the first to be kissed by that fiery exhaust, and just read the instructions out there again for the second time in the week soon after, doing the same. That's awesome. We even had ULA's Atlas V from SLC-41 this week, sending the Viasat-3 F2 communication satellite to a geosynchronous transfer orbit. Everything ran like clockwork, of course, and this was the 105th Atlas V flight, leaving just 11 missions left, all of which I believe are either for Starliner missions or Amazon satellites. Now, those, by the way, have confusingly been renamed from Kuiper to Leo. Yep, nice work, marketing team. That's not going to cause confusion at all. So there we go, my friends, another week of action done and dusted. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, that subscribe button is right there if you are not already catching up with us every weekend. Until then, do check out this video here if you missed it. Thanks for watching all this way through. As always, I will see you all in the next video.